Welcome back to the MMA Plug, presented to you by the Fan Cave on 98.1 FM, Mile High Sports Radio. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We're about to dive into this weekend's UFC 294 card. There has been so many changes over the course of the last week. We talked a little bit about one of the matchups in our 3-round segment. That changed. But we did give a mention that injury to Paulo might have some implications going on, as it did. Now, some argue that the changes that were made to the top of the bill in the main and the co-main event made this card better. What do you guys think? You can chime in and let us know on social media, me at Comments from the Peanut Gallery, or hit us up on the Jocko Fuel Energy line at 303-831-1340. Let us know your thoughts. Did you think that this card with the last-minute changes in the main and the co-main slot, did that get bolstered, or does that kind of take away from the card, or are you indifferent? Let us know. In the main event, we have one of the most highly anticipated rematches in a title fight that I can say in recent history. Now, yes, the original matchup between Islam Makhachev as well as Charles Oliveira, that was a matchup that a lot of people, myself included, really wanted to see. But that first fight was a definitive performance by a finish from Islam. The new fight that was made after last Tuesday night, when it was revealed that Charles had his eyebrows split open in his final training session prior to heading over to Abu Dhabi, in steps this little Australian dude with giant brass balls named Alexander Volkanovski. Those things can come in a dump truck, ladies and gentlemen. For him to come into this fight and take that on 11 days' notice, having to travel halfway around the world to go in there against a menacing prospect who handed him his only defeat inside of the UFC in that first matchup that they had last spring. Now, for me, I love this matchup, this rematch, even more than what the original fight was, and that's simply because I thought that Volk won the first matchup. It was a tight fight, and I understand where Islam got the nod. Totally do. I mean, I'm not here screaming that it was a robbery or anything like that. It was a very tightly contested fight that could have gone either way. But if you revisit that fight, the most defining moment of the entire contest was in that fifth and final round when Volk dropped Islam. And then as the fight is concluding down to the final bell, Volk is standing over the top of Islam, raining down ground and pound. That, I feel like, has a lot of merit to it. And some people will say, well, this really doesn't do anything for Islam to come in and fight a guy that he's already beat, and it's on short notice. It's against a smaller guy. All of the built-in excuses that you could possibly imagine. But I say otherwise. I think that there is a lot to gain for Islam in this matchup because of the fact that the first was somewhat, or not somewhat, it was controversial as far as the decision itself went, where you were pretty split down the middle of people who thought that Islam won or people who thought that Volk won. If Islam can go out there and put on a defining performance and, dare I say, finish Volk, which no one in the UFC has been able to do, obviously, then I think that really kind of helps cement his place as a champion. Whereas right now, there's some people who do believe that there are question marks surrounding his championship status. I imagine that Volk is going to be prepared for this matchup. Yes, you say that it's only 11 days notice, but Volk is one of those guys who is always ready so he doesn't have to get ready. You can say that it's only 11 days notice, but I have it on good authority from people around Volk in that city kickboxing camp that he's been preparing for this opportunity should somebody fall out in this matchup since mid-August. He fought International Fight Week in the beginning of July. After he beat Yair, he had to have a little surgery on his hand, and that put him out roughly 6-7 weeks. That puts you into that mid-August range, and he's been preparing for this opportunity as if he's in camp for the title fight ever since. So Yes, on paper, is it 11 days notice of him being the official fighter for this opportunity? Sure, but again, he's been preparing for this as if he was going to be that man all along. How do you guys think that fight's going to go? Let me know on social media at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. In the co-main event, we also had a shakeup. It was originally slated to be Paulo Costa taking on Boris Khamzat Chimaev. Now, in steps Kamaru Usman, the Nigerian Nightmare, on that same short notice, that same basically 11 days notice to go in there and fight a menacing prospect that there's a lot who shy away from. This is pretty interesting considering that, remember just a couple of months ago, or a few weeks, I should say, when talking about that next title shot at middleweight, that it was a mistake or it was going to be an issue for DDP, Dricus du Plessis, having pulled out against Israel Adesanya. I told you that he was going to get shelved. I told you that the big bad wolf was going to come in and play spoiler to this. Now, at that time, it was still the Paulo matchup, but based on the circumstances, Dana White himself has came out and said that the winner of this fight will be getting that next title shot at middleweight. Well, for all of you bum-ass jabronis out there who tried to troll me, who tried to send messages through the social channels, commenting on the YouTube video, so on and so forth, saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, that it's going to be DDP. It's already his spot. That nothing is written in stone when it comes to the UFC that way. And the storyline for Dricus is no longer there now that he is no longer the champ. Now that Izzy's no longer the champion. With that being said, this is a huge fight that's going to be coming up between the two of these guys. And the real question for me when we're talking about Kamaru versus Khamzat is, what is the status of Kamaru's knees? It's been all but confirmed that he's essentially bone on bone as far as his health conditions or as far as those joints go. If Khamzat goes out there and tries to put into effect a wrestling heavy approach, that might be problems. If Khamzat goes out there and tries to box with Usman, that's going to be Usman's best chance, in my personal opinion, because Usman had power at 170. We saw what he was able to do, knocking out some of the likes of Jorge Masvidal and the others. And we know that Khamzat at times will get a little bit wild when he's boxing, as he did against Dorino and Gilbert Burns, and where he got clipped a couple of times. He did show that he is human. He's not completely immortal. But in his fights following that, it was definitely a very grappling heavy approach. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him come out there and do that and have his I'll kill them all type of attitude and speech. There's a couple other fights on the card that I think are certainly noteworthy and keeping your eyes on. We have a feature fight in the light heavyweight division between the number 2 ranked Magomed Ankalaev taking on number 7 Johnny Walker. Magomed Ankalaev fought for the light heavyweight title back in December of last year. That was controversially noted as a draw. There's some people who thought that, you know what, he might have edged out Jan Blachowicz for that fight. But then there's also a lot that said it was pretty well even back and forth, and they weren't mad at a draw, which then obviously birthed the title fight opportunity that next month for Glover taking on Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill ended up winning that title. So I think that Magomed Ankalaev is going to be hungry to go out there and put a stamp on this performance. Johnny Walker is a guy, though, who has an electric skill set who can put anybody's lights out. He's a guy who at one point was touted as the one who would be the chosen guy to go on and take out John Jones. But injuries, discipline factors, moving from camp to camp, that all was a factor of Johnny Walker's path to where he is now. But he's been out there with Coach Kavanaugh and SBG for a little bit of time now, and he's put together a couple of wins. We'll see where this takes him. I mean, he's fighting the number 2 contenders, so where does that boost him in the rankings and the title picture should he win this fight? We'll have to see. A couple other matchups to keep your eyes on. We have a top-ranked matchup in the flyweight division between number 10 Tim Elliott taking on number 11 Mohamed Mokaev. This is essentially the tale of an OG taking on the young bull. You have someone like Makhachev, who is a rising prospect who is not shy to voice his opinion or to share his thoughts on social media. And he's taken on someone who's been around the block a time or two in Tim Elliott. Tim Elliott, obviously, he had his first run in the UFC, lost a couple of fights, was released, then goes on to the Ultimate Fighter series where he won the entire thing, earned the opportunity to fight for the UFC flyweight title against Mighty Mouse. That didn't go his way, but he's been able to stay in the thick of things and has been a ranked fighter who's one of the toughest guys in the division just because he's, as his namesake, his nickname sake, should I say, suggests, he's very awkward. And he does have a wrestling background and a grappling skill set that I think is going to have some problems for Makhachev. But this is also going to be a big test for Makhachev to see where exactly he is in terms of his development and his career. In the bantamweight division, you have Javid Basharat taking on Victor Henry. Both of these guys, both of the Basharat brothers, I should say, are a problem. This is Big Brother, the Snow Leopard, Javid, who is 14-0. He has 11 finishes, 8 of them coming by way of the first round. Victor Henry is a pupil of the War Master Josh Barnett. Henry's a well-rounded fighter who competed all over the world prior to making his way into the UFC. He looked like a serious threat in his debut against Raoni Barcelos. Next, he's had a mixed result after that. He lost one, then won one. But that's a guy who, again, he's good pretty much anywhere. He's a solid wrestler. He's solid off of his back with his jiu-jitsu game, and the dude can strike. You have the highly anticipated debut of the highly controversial Shara Magomedov taking on Bruno Silva. Shara is the undefeated one-eyed ginger Dagestani fighter with a history of violent public outbursts. He's 11-0 with 10 knockouts. This is someone that a lot of people have been waiting to see make his way into the UFC. And then finally, you have the fight for quite possibly who is the worst human on the UFC roster between Abu Azatar taking on Cedricus Dumas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is only an hour program. We could spend the entire show dissecting the criminal records of these two. But be on the lookout for an op-ed piece coming from yours truly later on this week at milehighsports.com that's going to go into depth at just how awful these two are, because it's really amazing that they're not locked up with the key thrown away somewhere. That wraps up our UFC Fight Night preview segment. Stick around after the break. We're going to be talking with the champ Elias Rodriguez. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by the Fan Cave on 98.1 FM, Mile High Sports Radio.
Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. That helps us continue to produce this original MMA content and bring it for you every single week. Tune in to the MMA Plug presented by
Fan Cave
on 98.1 FM, Mile High Sports Radio.